2 hours later, at the edge of Iceberg Lake inside a towering horseshoe glacier, we sat down and ate stoned wheat thins from Wyoming on a small rocky beach. After a few minutes, a prairie dog of some kind, a mountain prairie dog, hustled up to the icy clear lake for a drink, 5 or 6 feet to Abe's right. Abe turned and slowly nodded, very slowly. Ernie had been skipping stones across the lake, but then threw one at the animal. The rock missed and hit Abe in the side just under his elbow. Oops. What the hell, man? Abe said, justifiably annoyed and possibly hurt. Oh boy, I said, preparing to stand up. Sorry, sweet thing, Ernie said to Abe, not feeling at all bad about it. I climbed to my feet and walked up to the edge of the hillside meadow and turned around. Ernie threw a rock across the lake in the air. It made it most of the way across, then glanced off a small floating iceberg and splashed in the water. For the rest of the day, Abe hiked 100 yards in front or 100 yards behind us at times, feeling his connections peacefully by himself, he later said. I laughed a little when he made the fuss about the rock, but I knew Ernie really hadn't thrown it very hard, so I suspected there might be something else. What's on your mind, Abe? I asked him a bit later. But he just stared and didn't answer, as if somehow I was supposed to know. The rock was obviously a symbol of something much more important, much greater. Then he just looked disinterested. I'm not sure about you, Dan the man. Sometimes I worry about you. He moved to a slightly faster clip. Hey, where's Ern? I think we lost him. I'll hang back. I turned around and retraced a few of my steps. Sure, you do that. Hang back. It was only about 2 when we got close to camp again. The trail to Ptarmigan Lake and Ptarmigan Tunnel branched off to the left on the way down, and Abe was waiting at the fork when Ernie and I sighted him. He raised his arm to the other trail and disappeared onto it. Now what the hell's he doing? He's making us hike a little more, I guess. Oh yeah? Well, who says he gets to... Just come on, it's nice out here. Yeah, fine, Ernie agreed. We can throw more rocks at him. Just hike, I told him. Halfway up to the lake, with the valley to our right then, we spotted what looked like a glider soaring overhead. When it approached our side of the valley, it became an eagle, a white-headed eagle, an eagle about the size of a small airplane. And instead of coming all the way down, where it could have asked us any question it might have liked, it glided back up to 1,000 feet. Ernie picked up a flat stone and winged it a mile straight up, about halfway to the bird. Abe was up in front about 50 paces and turned around, but then turned back again, shaking his dark-haired head. The stone cratered on the path right behind us, and a moment later another one up in the bare grass to our left. Ernie then threw another stone at Abe, but probably overshot him on purpose, and sailed the rock into the thick trees below the trail. When the two of us caught up to Abe, he was standing still on the trail, looking downhill. He said he'd heard something moving around down in the woods. Don't forget, you two. If you come up on a bear and surprise it... What? Chimed Ernie. Well, let's not have the occasion to find out. Bears are even harder to deal with than you two goons are. Oh, now I'm a goon, I guess? I said it's a joke. Don't sweat it. Everyone's a goon to Abe here. It's good to be a goon, Ernie explained thoughtfully. Ernie then stepped up and shoved me in the backpack. I barely got my arms up and bumped Abe pretty hard. I immediately felt a little bad about it. Abe turned, half angry, half perplexed. "What's going on, Dan? You seem to have some sort of problem today." "Who, me? Oh, well, you know. Mi problema es tu problema, hermano." Ernie listened, laughed, and then shoved again, though not hard the second time. I stopped to adjust the backpack and we skipped up ahead. 2.5 weeks together. I was actually surprised it hadn't gotten worse than this. In another minute, I noticed hikers farther up the trail. We could barely make them out at first. They looked like mirages of us, where we wished we'd gotten to already. We'd been on the trail for 5 hours. They looked the way people look when up against something monstrous, something mountainous. Their motions were undetectable, but the zigzag of the trail was etched clearly into the mountainside. In 20 minutes we reached the same spot. In 30 we reached the tunnel, the cool black hole just below the high line, passageway to the far side of the mountain. The view on the near side was everything we'd hiked over since morning, all the way to iceberg, glacier, and the ends of the earth beyond it. The view on the far side seemed just about everything else. We stepped through the slushy tunnel onto the black stone balcony, a mortared ledge high over an abysmal drop-off. I stepped up to the edge, leaned my chest down on my forearms, and put my chin and fingers over the far side of the wall. Abe put a foot on the wall, an elbow on a knee, and his chin on a hand. Ernie Kane, a favorite old friend since elementary school, took a seat to the right, facing in, leaning down to pack the first of several wet snowballs. From a safe distance behind the low stone wall, Ernie threw big wet ones off into the giant glacial canyon. Most of them broke up, though, and turned to small sleet storms long before getting anywhere near the snow down below. And there was a lake there, a full 2 miles by Crow, the Peace Park visitor pamphlet said. As much below us as it was out in front, or so it seemed. He thought with good tosses he might be able to hit it. But his snowballs, after soaring out forward, dropped like snowmen out of sight below the rock outcroppings. One of those cliffs whose steepness and tallness makes the distance down to the snow in front appear much closer than it really is. For example, like speculating about jumping off a tall building onto the roof of another shorter one across the street. But then you end up just crashing to the sidewalk in front of the one you're on, maybe after glancing off the windows and sills on the way down. So instead you just stay there, enjoying the hell of a view for a few minutes. And then, when it's time, you sulk back home to your lackluster, lustful life. I stepped back and watched the others for a minute, staring long and hard at their backs, and then at the edge of the ledge, and then to their backs. The high-altitude sun was something else entirely. Ernie packed another one and took a huge run up. Then he repeated the step. Abe tossed loose handfuls, making rain out of the whiter snow on top that had piled up there in June. Ernie packed one last one and tossed it lazily over the stone wall. Abe was waiting then just inside the tunnel, running his fingers along the mossy black stones of the ceiling. I wiped my icy red hands on my shorts and backtracked through the rock ridge the way we came. Ptarmigan Lake again down below us, looking for a moment like a big shiny nickel in a giant cupped hand. Off the zigzag trail, about 30 or 40 yards, a long swath of knee-deep snow ran the length of the giant bowl, the one narrow, unmelted section of an otherwise rocky mountainside. With shorts, but nothing under, I sat on the nylon jacket from my backpack and pushed off for the bottom. Halfway down, I dropped my heels into the snow, but wasn't slowed in the least. 2/3 down and completely soaked with boots and socks drowned in icy cement. The speed was frightening, and the ride lasted a full 30 seconds. A long ride on your ass by any measure. Ernie zoomed down behind me, and with no jacket to sit on, howling like a big dog trying to stop himself on a finished wood floor, no longer as concerned with scaring the mailman. Abraham ran and jumped down the hill on his feet. At the bottom, I rolled out onto the dirt and rough rock mud plain, but somehow came up all right. Ernie planted his feet and came out running. Abe was walking by the time he reached the bottom third, and at the end sat down on a low boulder to finger the snow out of his waterproof hikers. Energized and feeling pretty good all in all, I looked back up the run to spot another slider coming down. When she reached the bottom, she gave out a long holler. She said she couldn't wait to get back east so she could tell her grandkids what she'd done. We named her Eleanor of Orlando, Lady of Ptarmigan Lake. Ernie knighted her with his big tan right arm held out rigid to her shoulders. At 4 or 5 in the afternoon, we were on the trail below Ptarmigan Lake, walking loose-kneed downhill toward camp. Ernie had thrown a few more rocks back to the lake, and Abe was just far enough ahead that we could only see him on a few of the long straightaways. The hillsides were noisy and wet. There were more invisible waterfalls than visible ones, rushes and trickles under the bare grass and denser bushes as the hillside seemed to be slipping out from underneath us. The valley floor was a radiant tropical green. At a distance, the fist-sized blossoms of bear grass looked a little like snow. My breathing was heavy. The air on the trail was much steamier than it was in and around the stonework of Ptarmigan Tunnel. In camp, we rested for a bit and then walked through to the parking lot again. This time to the hotel, where we sat on the porch in big log chairs and ate the split pea soup of the day. At 9 or 10 at night, it started pouring. We raced back to our campsite, folded up the tent, and jumped in the truck. Abe was in the driver's seat and drier than the two of us. He volunteered to look at the map while Ernie angrily helped me shake out the tent, trying to free it of some of the mud and pine needles that had clung to the underside. I fell asleep quickly in the back, but slept only a few hours at first. Sometime after midnight, we crossed into Idaho, and I woke up abruptly when Ernie swerved to miss a few deer in the road. Ernie and Abe had switched. Ernie was doing 80. His primary goal had by then decisively become San Francisco, where he would get to say goodbye, an occasion for all to feel good about.